Yeah, that's Kenmore here.
Yeah. Pretty
Just a quick interruption, so sorry, everyone just remind me of names, just because I'll be taking the minutes for Linda today. She's on holiday, I just want to make sure. Right?
There's Councilor White over there.
I see that.
Hello?
You know me?
Yes.
How's Dad?
Oh, after flooding at Christmas and being displaced for about 5 months, and yeah, getting better. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Ian Gordon.
Yeah.
Hey, Jared.
So Doug, Harbor Air, are they still working on their all-electric beavers?
Yeah, but right now they're waiting on batteries.
Jim?
Jeff.
Interesting.
Yeah, the batteries aren't there yet.
Yeah.
You know, that's a problem.
They've done some test flights though, haven't they?
Yeah, they've done one test flight, but the airplane was full of lead acids.
Okay.
Once they get the technology, it'll come.
It's just like anything else, once the batteries catch up.
Yeah, exactly. The batteries are good because they're trying to fit them. Trying to fit them all in the fuel base, right?
Councilor Stockton, where would you like me? Does it matter?
Hey Brian, how are you?
You could be talking to
Doing well. Well, I'm sitting in the city hall having a meeting at the moment. I'm about to start a meeting in about 5 minutes.
Hey Don, how are you?
I would love to, but I'm in Kamloops actually. Yeah, let's do it tomorrow. What time do you work? Actually, you know what? Evenings work better.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. Let me. Okay, not today, but can I give you a call when I have time? Yeah, I got your number. This is your number, right? Right? Yeah, I'm here.
What I'm waiting for is the latest, we left kind of Thursday, came back to the department.
So tell you what, when I give you a call, when I look at my schedule and decide I'll be back.
A friend of mine used to work for. Okay, that's also playgrounds, inspections of tank systems and cleaning of tank systems.
You know him?
It's kind of an annual trip for us. We actually
I guess the
friends of
latest
ours from Paris.
iteration is
They have
call me
and then I can try with here.
Jeremy.
He works
the last night.
that, I sent you all.
You're right down by.
Insurance records.
What is this?
Yeah.
So it's just meant to be Bill and Greg are both meant to be dialing in virtually.
So do we know if Greg or Phil are gonna make it?
They're supposed to be on that screen right there, but they haven't dialed into the meeting yet.
Brian.
Yes. Like I think even 3 years ago, pro snow.
His name is
Brad?
You know, that probably wouldn't be my favorite nickname of all time. There's so many different ways that you could go with that and have it become derogatory. Yeah. Never in my life.
I don't have these.
Absolutely.
Put it in here. I'll describe later.
I mean, worst case scenario, we should have a recording of it, so if you miss anything, then we can always double check.
Why am I?
Yeah,
There is an argument for that.
Where that road goes up,
I'm just.
Because the question will be useful, but it's not.
Thank you very much.
She says.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I've already had a chat podcast on this, so I'm hoping that I can get some because I've got a blind training session starting in 2 minutes.
I know I've left my meeting, I'm like, see you guys later, I'm gonna head downstairs, they're still continuing.
Nope, I am literally triple booked at 10 o'clock, so it's just a case of picking what to do.
Is there anything that I can do here?
I think just if at any point a message comes up on screen saying that there's a fellow driver trying to join the meeting, hit the button that says accept.
Okay, and that's on.
And then, so the broadcast is this, the council change the camera, and if they show up on screen, they will be in that one.
Okay, so just watch that screen and.
So you shouldn't need to do anything with this setup, and I've already hit broadcast. So just
If I see something up there, accept it on here.
no, we take use your mouse up there.
Yeah, okay.
To
And then the screen when we're done.
when the meeting's over.
Okay, I'll do it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then get up, make coffee.
Anyway, I would agree.
So I left them all hanging at
Yeah,
Austin Safety. Are you passing the buck on that one now?
I'll probably be.
Yeah, but we got,
Right next door to you.
Maybe you wanted to get out of there
She's
since you
right,
started.
come in the entrance, she's on the right.
Yeah, it's been like 4 years.
because I'd said that we would look at grabbing
Yeah,
it.
take a little bit of a break.
Couldn't find it, so.
Hey, Don, I was gonna ask you, I'm getting calls about booking
Literally 9:14.
building inspections.
She,
So why am I putting that through a
she thinks she's
month?
looking, I know the figures are aggressive.
We don't have
The fact that this is what you
All,
had.
all knowledge, all everything, and everything, and everything. Oh, God, she's looking after.
Okay, so you're not doing anything?
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you everybody for showing up.
Is the PA system
Call it to
working?
order, yes? Oh. Are we on this thing?
Yep.
Your light's on.
Yeah.
Okay. So first order of business, adoption of the minutes. Are there any,
Go on, carry on, any what?
corrections to be made in the minutes?
Yes. What
Ron
is it?
Sanders?
Yeah, the Ron Sanders thing is completely wrong.
Yeah.
So, we should probably, I've printed off all the stuff for,
Oh, I think I already sent that in to Christine. but-
did you? Yeah, this Lyle Sanders and the family, and how the airport was donated, not by him, but by Garth Waits and family, and Parker Brothers, and so on and so forth. So I've photographed everything. Should I pass it to you then?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, that would be good to have because I think there's been a lot of misunderstandings
Yeah, so,
through the years that he wasn't certainly the first one to fly in and so on.
yeah, no, he wasn't the first pilot. Sadly, he may have been the first pilot in Merritt that was killed, but he was also honored a couple of years back by PEP, the Provincial Emergency Program, as being a member of the search and rescue, and he and his spotter died looking for another aircraft in 67 or whatever it was.
67.
So, yeah, that's what it's all about. So, I think that info should be in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we'll make that correction and also put in some details with it because I think a lot of the town probably is not.
No, they're not aware of that.
And I was always under the impression that he was one of the original people that had started the airport and so on, but it isn't. He was owner-operator of Saunders Lumber Company, part owner of the Grasslands Hotel, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
And was instrumental in negotiating the relocation of the airport. So it was in 1967 that he passed away, and that's why the airport was named in his memory.
And it's interesting that the three families that were part of that land swap deal, the Garth Waits, Parker, and gentleman, what's his name? Because the airport has moved from its original site.
Yes.
So, yeah, that just corrects sort of the history of the airport and how it came about.
So who was it, the Garthwaite's?
It's on, I took a picture of the plaque which lists the
Oh,
families that are involved.
That would be major, for Nicola. It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we've got that correction in the minutes. Was
I
there
will
anything
take
else that was in the minutes that needed to be addressed? Okay, can we have the adoption of the minutes as amended? Mover and seconder? Doug that moved it and Ian that seconded it. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. New business. Now, the fencing and lighting plan, I know we've had several contacts about what's happening there, and basically whether we should skip the grant process and move forward, or request council to allocate funds from other sources to proceed as quickly as possible. Sean, did you want to speak to that?
Certainly, yeah.
Oh, which one?
That one on the left. Thanks, Councillor Christopherson. I believe that the email that I had sent out that actually had a copy of the grant for the $90,000 that was in question, that was sent out to the airport committee. Is that correct? Did you guys seen that?
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, I saw
Okay, okay. So the first thing that I wanted to do is just provide a little bit of clarity in relation to that grant, because I think that there was some confusion that was born from it. The very, very end of the province's fiscal year, when they are looking for things to do with excess budget dollars, they scramble to put programs together. And one thing that they reached out to do was basically a COVID operation for airport grants. And the city of Merritt was a recipient of $90,000 to support airport operations. So what I highlighted, I think, in that email that I'd sent out for the benefit of the committee, is that eligible costs for that grant are operational costs, and then capital costs weren't eligible expenditures for that $90,000 in funds. What I had said previously at another meeting was that if it were directed by council, when you receive grant funding that we must use for an operational purpose, there is the potential to use the grant funds for operation, and then if council wanted to allocate other dollars to other projects, that is a theoretical possibility. As it was presented to council, and I don't know, if, my apologies if there wasn't enough clarity to the committee, but the intent was that we would proceed with a fencing and lighting plan, get that drafted so that when the next airport access grant application, which generally the deadline falls in November, that we would be ready with that plan to be able to make the grant application. And that was what was communicated to council during the budget proceedings. I learned once we were talking about putting together the terms of reference for the consultant to be able to put together this fencing and lighting plan, and I understand from the committee that the feeling is that this will be a fairly easy plan to put together, because there's statutory requirements for what you have to have in terms of lighting and fencing for an airport. That the feeling was that perhaps we should just be proceeding with building out the fencing and lighting itself. At this point, I don't have an idea as to what the costs of that larger project would be, and I'll defer to the committee as to what the recommendation is. But as it stands right now, the direction of staff is to proceed with the creation of a plan and a grant application.
Okay, there's two things that I wanted to clarify before we proceeded with that. And one is whether the $90,000 will be sufficient, because we don't know the costs yet. And the second one is if we go ahead and request council to allocate present funding, I believe from other grants that I'm familiar with, that grants cannot be applied for retroactively. Once a project is done, you can't apply for grant money for it. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
So that'll probably be the question that council will have. Any discussion or any questions?
So operationally, what does that cover operationally? Like, is that maintenance?
Any maintenance, all of the crack sealing, fuel purchase, whatever it takes to keep the airport operational. So again, if it's kind of an accounting term, but anything that isn't us putting in infrastructure to that airport could be considered an operational expense.
So, sorry, so when the things I did, the research on for the fuel monitoring, so that is that part of a?
I think you could relatively easily fit that into an operational expense.
Yeah.
Because it's maintenance, maintaining or improving an existing asset. We've got the fuel tanks, now you're just adding on some functionality to them to build it out.
To make life easier.
Yeah.
Is this being recorded? Are we supposed to be using our mics?
It is being recorded.
So we should be using our mics then, sorry.
You want me to repeat that? Can the fuel transmitter units that we did the research on be covered under the operational budget or grant?
Okay, he's still blinking, so.
You hit it again. Sure. Nope. It's you have to hit the left button.
Okay.
Good.
There we go.
The answer is yes. I'm not giving a long one, or I don't have the pages for it, but yes, that would be considered an operational expense, and we think that that's something that we would be able to do.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. There you go.
Conversely then, repairing the fence, putting up new fencing to replace an existing fence should fall under that same category.
The challenge, if we were repairing an existing fence, you could probably say that that's an operational expense. But
Because the fence does exist, there is a border fence around the airport, and
yeah,
we need to replace it and repair it, so.
Right. I think the key word is replace versus repair. It needs more than just maintaining and fixing some links. You need a new fence that goes all the way around an airport. And I think this committee probably agrees with that, but I understand the intent, but again, this is a matter of not trying to pull one over on the grant funders. I'm not going to get in and put in a grant report, say, for the things that we are only allowed to use for operational expenses, we put in new lights and fences. They're going to say, yeah, I don't.
But we have an existing fence that has been torn down, so we're replacing that. Is that not considered maintenance then?
The replacement is a capital expense. Yeah. Maintenance is not a capital expense. Maintenance is operational. I recognize that it seems like semantics in this setting, but it's not. That's how this works. So.
Okay, because are the minutes then incorrect in saying that an airport improvement grant has been awarded? Is that not what it's called?
That is not the name of.
So under 3.1 of the staff updates, it states an airport improvement grant has been awarded by the City of Merritt. The funds will be used to develop lighting and fencing plans, but it calls it an airport improvement grant.
So I can pull up the exact name of the grant. Again, I think that it would be kind of crazy to think that there's exact fidelity with how minutes get recorded. I don't know what exact words were used, but we received a $90,000 grant to support airport operations. And again, I'd sent that out to you guys so that you can see that I'm not trying to be disingenuous with you. This is what the requirements of the grant are.
Yeah, I think at the time we were under the understanding that it was an improvement grant. But when we got the grant, it was worded a little bit differently. So, anyways, the decision remains of whether we want to not follow the grant process and request council to allocate funds to proceed with the fencing lighting as soon as possible. And that's what would have to go to council in order to make a decision at that time, and then proceed accordingly. Is that correct? So that's basically what the issue is right now, whether what recommendation this committee wants to make to council. Jeff?
I think some of my concerns, first of all, writing terms of reference for consultant are kind of beyond my abilities. I looked up a few examples online, and you know, one of the things for myself with lighting, the Canadian Transport Document 312 version 5 very much spells it out exactly what you have to do to the inch. You can't vary from it. And then for me, there's this overarching thing of we're going back to consultants. We're taking outside expertise. We're going to pay them $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to tell us exactly what the TP312 version 5 says, and we're just either we're not moving forward, and this is just delaying it. I understand you need something for applying for a grant, and so I'm kind of lost. I mean, I think staff is doing a great job, but I'm wondering if going through this whole process, are we talking a 10-year? Is this a delay tactic? Is this something that's gone on? And I think one of the things that as committee members, it's you know, yesterday I put my card in the fuel slot, and I pulled it out and it said error again, and I'm like, really? It's been twice this year I had to call out staff after hours, and I hate doing that because it costs the city a fortune. But I need fuel for my aircraft. I can't fly it. We as a committee have advised to build a little box that costs a very little amount of money. And so there's a whole bunch of things that have been happening that when I got into a meeting with you, Charlie, and you, Don, I was like, okay, so we're going to put another step into the grant to get a consultant to help us write a grant, to maybe get a grant to hire another consultant to think about how to build it, and I'm thinking there's got to be a better way. And maybe I'm just out of my depth, and I'm just a guy of action. I think there should be a better way of doing this. I look around this committee, you have a man who's run airports, a guy who's been involved in airlines, I'm a commercial pilot and a flight instructor, a man who's run heavy-duty equipment all of his life. There's got to be a way that we can do fencing and lighting and help, even for example, the issue of the little box. I know a number of these guys love working with wood. Why can't we come up with an idea of $250 from somewhere to build a box?
I'm going to ask us to stay on this topic.
Okay, so the topic as asked is, what are we going to do at this current procedure with the grant when it comes to lighting and fencing, and what are we going to do with the consultant? I propose we try to figure out a way to do it in a way that was not going to make this a 10-year project, but a project that could be done in 2-3 years.
I want to be really clear. I don't know where the 10-year number is coming from. I think it's probably facetious, but I mean, I'll be honest, I hate hearing that kind of stuff, because at no point have we ever articulated this is going to be a 10-year project. What we're talking about is getting a design so that you can actually go out and get a grant. Of course, you could put out an RFP right now that says we want contractors who are capable of putting in fencing and lighting to develop for us a plan and tell us what that plan is going to cost to do. You could do that very, very quickly, but if you go that process, you can't get grants, because in order to apply for a grant, you need to have a design that says the project that you're looking to complete. And so, yeah, there is absolutely an easier way to do this, but what we're saying is, and what my direction from council has been, so that the frustration here isn't getting pinned, we are trying to build out our assets at the most economic price point possible, and that has been to maximize grant opportunities. That has been my direction from council, and I feel that we as staff have done a really good job in trying to make that happen. And so when it comes down to this fencing and lighting plan, our goal is to have a plan that we can apply for a grant and hopefully get this funded. And I feel very, very confident with an airport that hasn't seen a lot of love in more than a decade, that when we put in a grant application saying that our airport doesn't have fencing and lighting, that's probably going to be received quite well by the grant funders. And so I think it would be a missed opportunity to give up dollars that are going to go into another community with the idea that it would be pushed now, because I think that you could probably get the project done this year or in the spring if you weren't to go through the grant process. But with the Air Access Grant, my understanding is that generally speaking, they make their announcements on funding in early 2022, and it would still be possible to get that project done if we were in 2022 if we were successful with the grant. And so I hear the frustration, but in my opinion, I don't think it's warranted.
It just seems to me that the obvious thing we need to do is nail down the costs of these things. How do we proceed if we don't know what the costs are going to be?
Thank you. That's precisely what my read as a councillor would be. How much does it cost and where's the money coming from? And that has to be done. And it is a lengthy process, which is frustrating to a lot of folks. But
how much,
we're holding to the tax.
how much time is it actually going to take to nail down some costs?
I think that's what this.
To hire somebody to do that?
It's what this plan would do. Realistically, you're going to have somebody say, all right, here's the fencing, the lighting, here's the dimensions, here's what you need. It's not going to be all that complicated. You've just said it here. Then you take that out, and you could find some budgetary information without too much difficulty. But again, this is all part of what would constitute the fencing and lighting plan that you would then use to go seek a grant, because we don't know what amount to ask for until we have pricing for that project. Whether it's a downtown bathroom or whatever it is, we get a design done up, we get an estimate on what the costs of that project are going to be, then you go out to a grant for it.
So what's the next step to nail down the costs?
That's a good
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Christopherson. So just to ease some minds, I think, and provide some clarity, I'm working with WSB after kind of we asked the committee to produce some terms of reference, which was denied by the committee. I moved forward with WSB to get a proposal together. They have 30,000 employees in an entire aviation department. They're currently working on a proposal to submit to me of what the cost for the lighting and plan B. From that, we can go with recommendations of cost for construction. So we talk, action. There is action being put forward. When we talk about the blocks, we had quoted from Alpha Design at $5,000. We moved forward with Barry Jackson, who's currently constructing. So, we're 3 months into these discussions and putting, wood up there or whatever it is. We're not moving that way. We're moving with stainless. We want it to last. So, the ball is rolling essentially.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm not sure who built the enclosure out of the airport right now that's been totally fenced. Is that the city's property that was totally fenced out there? On the west side? When you drive down Airport Road, there's a complete piece of property now that's got a brand new fence all the way around it with a beautiful gate on it.
Yeah.
Chain link fence, it's absolutely gorgeous, and it goes right up against our fence. So I have a copy of a fence design that I could submit to someone and say, we need 13,000 feet of that. Okay, so who can I?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. And looking at that fence that's out there,
right.
It's perfect.
And I really do appreciate what you're saying and what the committee is saying. All I'm trying to articulate is if I were to submit that as part of a grant application and saying, dear funders, we want 13,000 feet of this. That isn't enough of what they're looking for.
No, but then
So-
you can take this to a contractor and send out an RFP saying you need 13,000 feet of fencing in that design, and they'll give you a quote, and then is that not?
Right, but an RFP implies that we're proceeding with that contract before we get the grant. What we do is you get the plan,
Okay.
then you get the grant, and then you go out to the RFP.
So what do you need further on that plan?
If we're already doing this, if you guys want to go the grant way, we will have a plan that is ready to apply for the airport access grant in November. That would give us the costing, like that's already the path that we're on. We don't need anything more.
Oh,
What we need is if the committee, because my understanding was that there was a want to move forward earlier. If there's a frustration with the idea that we would create a plan that would allow for a grant application, you could bypass that whole thing, go out to do an RFP as soon as possible, but then it's coming out of taxpayer dollars, there's not going to be grant funding for it. And again, I'm not council, I don't personally think that's a fantastic idea, but I defer to council on the recommendations of this committee. But we're already doing exactly that for the airport fencing and lighting. We had invited members of the committee because we thought that you wanted input, but understanding now that that's not necessarily the case, and that's totally okay. Because again, we will go do it. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding on, first of all, we thought there was no movement on the grants. You just saying that we'll be ready to have something to apply for the grants in November is kind of new to us as a committee.
I don't think that's the case personally. If that's
so I guess I'm with Jeff. Sorry to jump in, but I'm totally confused, and I'm jumping down a rabbit hole here because we were asked to come up with some terms of reference, and for us to come up with the terms of reference, I was totally out of my element.
You're not on.
Yeah.
Jeffrey's still on. Well, your mic is on.
I
can't turn his mic on.
you can.
do I turn mine off?
Yes.
No, I apologize because I'm totally out of my element here because we were asked to come up with the terms of reference, and Jeff and I both sat and discussed it many times. Like, what the heck is that in terms of? Do you need a design? Do you need a plan? What are we doing? So
It's totally cool.
I was totally.
We felt that you were asking to be involved with the terms of reference. We can totally move forward with this. We do it for projects dozens of times a year, this exact process, and we can very easily, work with an engineer, have this plan put together, get a design so that we can go out for a grant application. And that is the intent, and my concern is always this, that because of the time that's taken now, I'm starting to think, all right, we want to get this done for November, and that's why we're having the conversation now. Because if we're not going to be moving forward down that path, we wanted to know about it. But that is definitely where we're moving.
So, pros and cons of going in either direction, either applying for a grant or just going ahead and do it. I mean, what are you suggesting that we do?
There's a lot of different. The staff recommendation is what's already on the table, that we would proceed with the plan and seek grant funding. But again, I say that largely because that's the direction that council's given me. So if I get alternate direction and you guys say, hey, this is so important that we want to bypass the grant and go for an RFP right now, I don't know what schedules on RFP might be, but if we were to launch an RFP next week, saying, hey, we want a design build, whatever it would look like, that would probably be up for about 4 weeks, would take us to the end of September. Would somebody be able to get it in time? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know, but maybe it would expedite it. Maybe it would still end up happening in 2022 anyways. So for me, I think with where we're at in the timeline right now, I would love to see this as a 2022 capital project based on a grant application that I think we have a really strong chance of getting. So I think that's going to be great for the airport. It's going to be great for the taxpayers, and hopefully getting some funding to assist with that. That's my hope. But
And I'm okay with that as long as we are moving in that direction. And we have, we have some definite goals and looking at time frame. And
that's the part I feel bad about, because when we were talking about preparing terms of reference for this is always what staff were talking about, but obviously this is not, that was not the synonymous understanding with the committee. So my apologies for the misunderstanding if that was the case.
Before we proceed any further, it seems to me that a lot of misunderstandings with this committee are that there's not very much in the way of communication. Very often I send out information, I get no responses back whatsoever. So I'm in the dark. My job as a chair is to collect the information and direct it to the proper sources. This is the council directed activity. Okay. We appreciate all the information that the committee members are able to give us, but there are processes to go through. Basically, the question right now is whether this committee wants to recommend that council approve bypassing the process of applying for a grant and seek funds from city money. And that's the issue that's on the table right now. What direction do you want to ask council to consider? I don't make that decision. You don't make that. We make a recommendation to council, and council will decide whether they want to bypass the grant process and shortcut. But there's a cost to that, and that's the taxpayers of the city. So I'd like to direct it back to what the question is on the table right now, so we can proceed.
Well, then I'll put a, sorry.
Jeffrey was
Jeff.
I think we are talking procedure. I think we are talking information. I appreciate the reminder of that. One of the things that I think what happened was we all understand what terms of reference are, we all understand procedures, we understand how the council is the boss of this, and we just recommend, we're not a committee with power. One of the things that happened with the meeting with Don and Charlie, Ian and myself was, and speaking to you, Sean, and the committee, the issue was we were asked to write terms of reference. Ian and I are not in the business of writing terms of reference. It's not, and especially for something that we just didn't understand what was going on. So both Ian and I said, well, we'd like to have input in writing the terms of reference, but to start off from scratch and write terms of reference for something that we don't do on a regular basis is too difficult. So there's a misunderstanding in terms of communication. It has nothing to do with the communication between you, Kurt, or us. It just, we were put in a spot that, for example, Kurt, if I asked you to fly a 737, you couldn't do it. But if I asked you, say, could you guide me to what airport you want me to take you in a 737, I could do that. And that's we'd like to have input in what we write references, the reference for. For example, do we have a 6-foot fence or an 8-foot fence?
When you come to that, I don't recall this committee directing anybody to go out and write out the terms. I think we've always been very open to having input, and I'm a little astounded that members of the committee would be meeting with staff without committee input. Maybe it's time we felt each other out and figured out what is
so
the proper routes to go through.
So what happened was we had a committee meeting, and at that committee meeting, we were all there. We said we were going to meet with myself, Ian, Don, and Charlie to write terms of reference. That came out of this committee. We were allocated, Ian, myself for lighting, Ian for fencing, and we would talk to staff and have a meeting, which was arranged back in May, I believe. I think it was
Bang.
I think it was May. And so this is out of this committee. We didn't do anything outside this committee. This was directed by the committee to talk to staff, to help staff write terms of reference for fencing and lighting. And so we did that. We just felt out of our element, and I did write an email to Don saying we're out of our element. We'd like to have input of kind of what type of lighting or what type of fencing, but not to write the whole terms of reference because I have no experience. And I spent a whole morning looking up how to write terms of reference for a consultant because I had no clue how to do it.
Which is appreciated, but I think that we need to clarify our goals. Sean?
I'm actually really heartened by this because, again, what you just described is exactly what we had envisioned. We'll get some input from the committee members, we'll put out some terms of reference for the fencing and lighting plan, and it sounds like that's still that's still the course we're on. I think what happened was there was something in that process where we felt that maybe the committee or you didn't want to proceed with the plan. The idea was that you'd proceed with that. What you're saying, what I'm hearing from you now, is that you just didn't want to write the terms of reference, and we would never expect somebody to write the terms of reference and act on behalf of the city and putting these things out. No, it was always about input in the first place. So I think we're on the same page. I don't know that there's any need to beat the dead horse. I respect you. I think we see where we're going. We will put out a request to have this fencing and lighting plan done, and we will absolutely run those terms before we send it out. We can run it by you, invite you and say, hey, what do you think about this? And we'll leave it at that. And if that works for the group, I'm happy with it. So.
I would like to make a request then, so that perhaps a lot of this could have been avoided had I been kept in the loop. Because I'm certainly no expert on the airport. You know, if we all had the information, we wouldn't need an advisory committee. We need you. But we need to be able to converse easily. And I don't call the work sessions, but I'm always available. If there are questions that, my role is to liaison with council, so that perhaps some of these misunderstandings can get understood much more quickly. So I would ask that I just be kept in the loop. I can't do my job effectively if I'm a child. So, are we ready to deal with 3.1? There's Charlie.
My recommendation is if we can wait for the proposal from WSP. In that proposal, there is requests from WSP, kind of topo survey, obstacle limitations, development plans with certain properties. And I think when that proposal comes through within the month, we can round table it. And at that point, you guys can provide your input and we can take that back to the consultant. And proposals are free. I mean, they don't cost anything. So that team is working to submit that to myself, and then we can discuss the points that are on that proposal. And you know, if the budget is there, then we can proceed with that proposal and apply for grant applications. There is a bit of concerns with the current fence being inside the obstacle limitations. We've kind of run into that with Trans Mountain completing some work at the end of the runway. So I think it's, rather than skip and go straight for construction of the fence, we need to really identify the development plans for those vacant lots, just include those, have considerations for those, as well as have considerations for the exact area that this fencing would be implemented. We're an engineering team of 2. I'm one of those folks. So for me to sit down and write, you know, a 15-page proposal, get survey out, it's pretty time consuming for me, especially I got, you know, 31 other projects on the go currently. So my recommendation is that we wait for this proposal from WSP. As I mentioned, they have a complete aviation department that's working on this, and then we can round table and discuss it.
So they'll do the fence as well?
No, it's the plan.
Yeah, but I mean, they'll come up with a recommendation for the
That's right.
fencing as well.
That's right. And with those is always construction costs as well. So it's something that we can all have, rather than having these pointing fingers conversations. Let's wait to see what the proposal is, what the construction costs are. Then we can take construction costs to council, and whether if they want to approve or not to move forward with a capital plan or wait for a grant application.
Can I ask a question, Charlie?
Absolutely.
Just go on to your mic, please.
Oh, okay. The question about the existing fence within the obstacle limit heights?
Yeah, at the, I'm going to call it north, but yeah, the Trans Mountain's done a great job of review because they obviously have quite a bit of side booms coming in. So they have to calculate the height of those, and they brought in our current fencing, which was inside of that. So that's just come up in the last couple of weeks.
So the 3-foot fence is inside the obstacle limit?
Yeah, so their recommendation of a fence to be here, ours is inside of where that should be. So that's what I'm saying, when we have these proposals come through, we can get proper engineering and put the exact fence where it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, I find it really odd that a 3-foot fence would be inside the obstacle limit.
That's just the feedback I received from Trans Mountain.
Wow. Can I put forward a recommendation then that we recommend to the council that they proceed with the grant applications and whatever process it needs to progress for lighting and fencing, as we seem to be told is progressing.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Jeffrey? Any more discussion or questions?
So once you get your information together,
Ray?
Sorry. Once you get your information together, Charlie, would you then inform the committee so we can meet together with you and be up to speed on what's happening?
Absolutely. Yep.
Good.
As soon as the proposal comes through, I'll meet with John and then we can distribute the information.
In my mind, there's confusion over what the obstacle limitation surfaces are. And that's one of the things we've got to get sorted out, because it affects even all the buildings along the runway that are proposed, and so we need to get that sorted out.
And that would be something that would be really appropriate for our working committee, I would think, and then they can bring recommendations to this committee or through the council or whatever.
I did just want to add here, because I think the tensions got quite high, and now that I'm seeing the scope of things, it probably didn't necessarily need to. You don't technically need a resolution for this, because again, it's the direction that we already have, so there's not a problem if you choose to continue with the resolution. That's okay as well. And to your point, Ray, obstacle limitation services, we've heard that a lot of times, that I think we need to provide some clarity. So Don and I have talked about how we as the city can, even if it's not the final engineering for the specific locations, start talking about kind of what the ballpark is for obstacle limitation surface. So you come out from the edge of the runway, and then you've got your angle of inclination from there. So we will, we're well aware of that, and I think that's some clarification that we need to do, hit for the airport to really see it hit stride on development in general, not just for a project like this.
So we do have a motion on the floor. Do we not need that motion?
You can proceed with it if that's how you choose. It's not technically
Okay, well, we may as well make it formal. So, all in favor of the motion is opposed? Carried. Okay. And thank you very much for the very frank discussion, because I think we need to know where we're coming from. 3.2, remote fuel quality sensors, quantity sensors. Doug, you have an update?
Actually, I was looking for an update from you guys, because this is all part of, I think, what we've been discussing already today is the communication. Like, we met in May, we were tasked with some stuff, and I sent an email in, took some time, but I sent an email and then it's like it goes into a dark hole. Like, we never hear anything back from, oh, we're looking at that, or we're not looking at it, thanks for the proposal. It's like, I mean, there's no response ever. Like, I mean, it's just like we meet again in August, and now we're talking about stuff that, you know, it'd be nice if we had some sort of communication back over the period of time between meetings. Like if Sean, Don, if you're working on this, the fencing thing, then just an update, say, hey, we're working on this and stuff. Because we're coming in here from listening to everything, it's like everything seems to be progressing as far as the city goes, and as far as the planning department, everything goes, but we don't know that. How do we know that if we don't get any kind of correspondence back?
Weren't you copied on the?
I saw the grant, but it was just
No one on the fuel sensor.
Yeah, I asked you to send it to the
Yeah.
appropriate people. Well, it went to the appropriate people, and that was it. I never heard anything back from anybody saying, like Charlie or anybody
Makes
saying.
sense to me because
So, anyways, all I'm saying is, like, I did the research, I did the work. Is the city interested? Are they not interested? It would save a lot of money because it sends you guys updates on the fuel, where it is. It can go directly to Jeremy and our fuel supplier, and he could bring fuel in before you guys have to go get it, right? Like, it's all. Anyways, it's just what I had to say.
I'm a bit confused because I thought we had emails going back and forth with the fuel sensor and installation up at the airport, and I thought you had been copied on everything that Sean, you and I.
I see what you're saying. I don't have any comment if you would like, Councillor Starkson.
Just one more.
Sean? Okay.
The only thing I will add to that is, because the valves are down in a hole, they're probably going to have to be extended so that they do hit the cell range. That's the only. Charlie?
I know Andrew, the new superintendent, has been in contact, but there hasn't been moved to installation or purchase of that yet. So that's where we stand, and apologize if I haven't communicated back. It's been a bit busy. But Andrew is our new superintendent, and I know he was in a conference call with them yesterday, but nothing has been purchased or planned to be installed quite yet.
I want to say thank you, Doug. I appreciate that feedback. Because all I had responded with is, hey, Doug, thanks. We can absolutely take this up at the meeting. And I think that this is really about expectations, and I'll own that 100%. For me, if a member of the committee says, hey, here's some information, in my mind, I'm thinking that this is information for staff and for the committee to discuss and take up. Is this something that we want to see so that we can get kind of an information from everyone on the committee? That's often how we look at these things, is if the committee says, hey, this is something that you want us to be looking at, awesome. And so as a member of the committee, that's sort of what I think. Again, I'm not doing a deep dive when I get an email on hey, here's this sensor, what are your immediate thoughts? I'm thinking that this is information that's coming forward to staff and the committee to consider whether we should or should not be implementing these on our systems. And again, we look at it and we say, yeah, it makes sense. Wouldn't it be nice if basically you had a trigger and stuff gets automatically ordered once your fuel gets low? I think it's a brilliant thing to add onto the system, and it makes good sense to me. And I think that, again, given the likely cost of this, it's something that we can just implement. But aside from me responding saying, hey, we can absolutely take this up at the meeting, because again, that was my thought, is that there was just going to be a conversation about it here as to whether that made sense and something you wanted us to pursue. But I think that I'm understanding more that when an individual member of the committee is asking things, that the expectation has been that there's going to be more direct interaction with the individual member as opposed to the committee as the whole, which is generally how staff see that interaction is happening. So if there's an intent that we've missed, we can absolutely say, hey, Doug, we think this is a great idea. Let's talk about it at the committee stage. And that's generally how we would approach it. So apologies if we missed expectations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's becoming very evident that assumptions are being made. And I'm guilty of that as well, assuming that when information comes to me and I direct it to the source, I usually email back to the person and saying what I've done that way, but is it more appropriate to copy to everyone on the committee and get conversations going that way? And if that's a function that we can do, because we only have 4 of these kind of meetings where requests go to council a year. My assumption has been that working committees would fill some of that gap, but it certainly doesn't include everybody, and so maybe we need to be using that reply all button a lot more. Because we can do, I think it has been really frustrating working under COVID. We can't get together like committees normally do. Maybe we're going to go that route soon, I hope, but so we'll have to work on communications. Anything else with the remote fuel quantity sensors or anything fuel management wise stuff? No? Okay. Do we have an update on the operations manual? And do you need any help with it?
I've created a sort of a framework for the manual. It's now 41 pages long. I've also produced a table of contents if anybody wishes to see what's actually included in it. And the last 2 pieces that I'm working on right now are with the radio control group in Merritt, trying to see what they see should be inside of this in terms of operations out of the airport for radio control aircraft. And the other piece is just talking to Doug today and with the consultant that I've worked with in the past for fueling is policies and procedures for maintaining tanks and inspections. So yeah, I'm hoping I can have this put together in the next couple of months and get it out so that people can tear it apart and we can work through it.
Do you want to send a working document out to the committee members?
I will once I get the last 2 pieces put together. Okay. And then I'll fire it out because it's based on Transport Canada's recommendations for what it should entail. And yeah, it's pretty intense. It covers pretty well everything at the airport. Wow. Further to that, about the obstacle limits, they're purely based on the classification of our runway. Mm-hmm. And the city, I think, in their last set of documents they put out when we were looking at classifications of runways, it's pretty well known what the limitations are. So, further to that, I'm really pleased with Andrew. He's been working like a dog out there at the airport with the fuel system, and he's been really good. And I apologize because Andrew talked to me about the box around the card reader, and he had told me that it had gone out, and Jackson's are creating a box for that. And I probably should have just fired out an email to everybody to keep you in the loop, but I apologize for that because Andrew's been really on top of that. And I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but the tie downs are fantastic. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see, perhaps we need a letter from the city in terms of trying to ask the pilots to move their aircraft to the new line so that we can work on the old line. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you, Charlie.
How many are there that are still, how many aircraft are there that are
still on the old line?
Yeah.
3.
It's just 3.
I didn't realize you wanted to move.
No, that's what I'm saying. I can't go out and tell you to move or anybody else to move.
It's good. Good suggestion.
It's just a suggestion that maybe you can contact the pilots and how to move. Yeah. The other thing, the 152 that's damaged should be moved. Andrew's mentioned that to me, yeah, and I mentioned it to Jeff. Yeah, it's sitting there.
Can you go back on your mic?
Yeah. There is there is a section in the new operations manual about dealing with damaged aircraft and what to do. So I'd like, maybe we need to send a letter to the owner to have it moved, put it on the line, tie it down.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of helicopter pilots say that they don't like it sitting there. So, yeah. Just.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate what you're doing, and if myself or anybody else on the committee can help, even with things like proofreading,
Oh, no.
you know, things like that, let us know, and it would be really appreciated to. I think we really do need to work on our communications. It sounds like things are being done, but not getting out there. And nice to know about the tie downs as well. And we can take care of fighting it. Okay. All right. Any other questions at all about the operations manual? Okay, on to 3.4, staff reports. I just asked for a few statistics to be made relevant to people, and I think you probably all got them, but staff report on A, use of the airport during the 2021 firefighting season. Is that you, Charlie?
That is, yeah. So since November 2020, in the logbook there's 62 entries. The majority, as everybody is aware, the use of the airport is for emergency firefighting. That's been our focus the last while. I believe valuations of fuel consumption is massive. We're seeing quite a drop right now. We didn't have any fuel usage in the last couple of days, but I think I've watched 3 helicopters take off. When I was up there, we were servicing 11 helicopters, 6 were in line for fuel. As Jeff mentioned, we had a couple hiccups with the card reader, but we have 2 spares. We've had, I think, including Jeff's, just 3 issues. We were using up to 40,000 liters per week. So you probably noticed the tanker trucks every 3rd day we're filling up our tanks. So I think we've done a very bang-up job servicing the wildfires in this community, and that is our focus. And previously mentioned, the logbook is only showing 62 entries since November.
Any questions for Ian?
Yeah, the logbook I think was sort of an experiment to see if it would actually work in terms of recording movements, but no, it doesn't. And when you have commercial aircraft coming and going like that, they do not have the time to rip in and sign a logbook. So I appreciate the city's efforts, because I was sort of the director of that. But speaking to that, I think we should address the issue of recording traffic. And there are systems out there where you can have a computer linked to a radio, and it just reports every time somebody clicks 123.2, it reports the voice movement of every aircraft coming and going on the airport. I know other airports are using that for recording traffic movements, and it's a security issue, it's a safety issue. I've done some research on that, but I think we need to take it that next step and maybe look at applying for some funds through council to put in a better system.
Would that be something that we could take up at the next meeting as a recommendation to council?
Yeah.
Do you have any cost?
Oh yeah, it could be, $3,000-4,000. I mean, if you look at a computer and a radio and then the software to deal with it, it's about $3,000 or $4,000. So I can bring that for our next meeting.
Yeah, I think, and keep what you find out, if you wouldn't mind putting out to the committee, and I'll make sure that it gets the appropriate section. Just those are the kinds of things that I think that are really appropriate to have conversations towards, because you're quite right. I don't think a logbook is only as good as how many people sign it. And most of them aren't doing it. And it's nice as a book for people to write comments and things like that, but it doesn't do the function of knowing what traffic is, right?
So I think it's fair to say that historically the numbers that we recorded at our airport are very low compared to reality. And so anything we can do to reflect the actual numbers benefits our airport. We need to move in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Was there anything more, Charlie?
No, not on that one.
Okay, did you have another? Okay. Amount of gas sold in 2021?
I can take that one up. So year to date so far, we've sold $226,000 worth of fuel. Again, our margins on that are between 10 and 15% depending on the time. So it's not like that's the profit figure, that's the amount of fuel sold. So that is drastically higher than what we historically see, and that is really explained by wildfire season. Ordinarily 60,000 is right around the ballpark that we see for sales. So we're anticipating that by end of year we're forecasting about $294,000 of fuel sales this year, so roughly 5 times higher, largely on the backs of fuel for firefighting. So I do want to add that data has value, like big time. I think that making good decisions comes from having good data, and the closest thing we have is airport fuel sales, and it's valuable to have that information, but I think that only tells part of the story, and so it would be helpful. I actually like the idea, if there's a way that it's not labor intensive to be able to track touchdowns, I'd be really curious about that software, because it sounds like that would be an excellent way of going about it at relatively low cost, if it is what you're saying there. So again, kind of typical for us, it's not unusual to have somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 a month of fuel sales, but to give you an idea, July's fuel sales were $140,000. So big. Yeah, the graph looks a bit goofy, because the last 3.5 years they're all hovering around right at the bottom, and then you just see one crazy peak here in July, which always does. It is our highest month every year, but it's atypically large this year, and I believe again that graph was circulated to the committee. Yes, okay. In terms of expenditures as well, this is another sheet that had been provided to the committee, but
did you get it?
No, I don't remember getting it. Did you get it?
Nobody got it? I will do that as soon as I get home, so you can look through it yourselves.
Cool.
That's okay.
Okay. Yep. What we are looking at, and this would include the COVID funding, airport hangar rental, we're looking at $334,000 of airport revenue for 2021 year to date, with forecasted $411,000 of revenue. Again, this is our Q2 forecast. In terms of expenditures, to the anticipated spend is going to be $380,000 on an annual basis, so we're forecasting a $31,000 operating surplus from airport operations, which is a win, because we were not profitable in recent years. So hitting profit is awesome. Of course, again, I will say that it is largely driven by an anomaly event, and so, but we would like to continue to work with this committee to drive the profitability of that airport, really hoping that airport hangar rental and some of these other initiatives are going to have this, where it can be something that at the very least is comfortably paying for itself. But I think that it actually has more economic opportunity, then that, I think it can branch out to support other operations done well, so.
Quick question on that. When the airport does show a profit, where does that money go? Does it go back into the airport or into general revenue?
Right now, it would be going into general revenue. That being said, you guys are aware that maybe the committee isn't aware, there have been a number of reserves that have been set up on the city side. So one of those is an infrastructure reserve that wouldn't be dedicated to just the airport, but what would happen is it would go into general, but council would then allocate it to various reserves as part of the budget process. So.
Speaking to that then, do we need to recommend to council that we create an airport reserve, that this profit goes into a reserve?
It is absolutely a recommendation. What I will say is I would strongly suspect that the spending on the airport in the next 5 years is going to, there's no way the profit from the airport is going to come from it. So I think that there's going to be net investments right now. And so I wouldn't want it to be too hamstrung, because ordinarily when you set up reserve, you only spend what's in the reserve. And I think that there's going to need to be more investment, particularly as we start going down the path of hangars and other opportunities, which I really do think are worth exploring. Having looked at it, I think that a lot of these have somewhere between 8 and 12-year return periods, which is pretty good for an investment. If we can start moving on some of those opportunities, I would like to see that. But again, it's going to come down to budget. There's a lot of different priorities on council's plate right now. But I'm happy to say that I think that there's going to be more than the $31,000 allocated. Even though I'm not council, I can't speak for that. You're going to see a lot more than that allocated to it over the next few years, given the fact that I think we can start leveraging this into being an economic driver for the community, as opposed to just being something that is an asset that is routinely underutilized. The other thing that of course comes into play with the airport that we haven't talked about is this is direct airport revenue, but if we can increase more commercialization at the airport, it will also result in taxation revenue that isn't factored in as part of this equation. So I will say there's some things that I've gotten more excited about, and that really is the hangar opportunities. Looking at this and fuel sales and things like that, I'm realizing that is probably not going to be our bread and butter, a huge focus for staff until there are, if there's a flight school or other things that can change the equation in fairly short order. But as it stands right now, really wanting to look at how we can maximize development both on the private and the city side of the airport.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I would recommend having a separate budget for the airport at the moment. When you have a separate budget or a separate reserve, it becomes a political football. And today we have a surplus, and we'd love to donate that back to the city or keep it in the city so everybody's happy, so that one day when we need some extra funds, that would be my recommendation. Yeah, it is exciting. One of the things that we as the committee members, if you're around the airport, do talk to the helicopter operators about buying our fuel. Because what I told one of them that, hey, we really like you, he says, you know what? That's actually what we're going to do. We have a way to do it, buy it somewhere else, but yeah, you're right, we're using your airport. And I said, it's very appreciated you buying our fuel. So if you have your staff around too, just talk to the operators, because they do have other options a lot of times, sometimes in the field. And if they hear that, hey, we make money doing this, and we provide you services at terminal, bathrooms, places to land. And so let's continue to encourage that fuel sales.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think for a number of years, especially the helicopter companies were taking their fuel out closer to their bases, and we weren't seeing any sales here whatsoever. So thanks, it's much appreciated.
Further to Jeff's comments, I think that's a statement on how the city system is functioning for fuel this fire season, because there hasn't been a single Bowser out there. from another company, because they do. They can bring their own fuel. And in past years, they've had Bowser's parked out on the tarmac fueling their helicopters. So that's a great comment. And we need to promote that, because I think the new reality is that Merritt is a very central location for fire bases. And talking to the pilots, yeah, they've got Bowser's out at the fires, but they are transiting back here 40, 45 minutes to spend the night here. Because there is no other airport in the area that's either open or accessible. So promoting our airport as that is really good, I think, for the city and the community. The other interesting thing is that I think as forestry starts looking at how they are going to deal with fires in the future, years ago they used to have initial attack bases at a lot of the smaller airports, and they've kind of disappeared. I think we're sitting prime to discuss that new issue of maybe setting up an initial attack base here. So I think there's some really good growth possibilities for the airport.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add one comment on that front? I actually had spoken with the manager of the provincial wildfire center that's currently up on the airport lands. Did have a conversation with him and said that I would relay it to this committee. He would like to attend these meetings not as a voting member, but as an advisory member, somebody there that, again, is on the airport, would have some thoughts, some additional ideas. I said that I would bring it up at this committee, and hopefully there isn't going to be any concern with having more people attending the meeting.
No, not at all.
Okay, sounds good. I'll relay that information then.
Good, thank you. Anything else to do with that item? No, okay. We've kind of covered use of the airport commercially and recreationally, but is there any more information that needs to come up?
I've talked to 3 flying schools in Langley, 1 flying school in Kamloops. They're considering it, especially with this last season. They're excited, especially one in Kamloops has been smoked in, at least moving a temporary base to Merritt. So I continue to talk to flight schools and see if we can get something here operating. But nothing firm, nothing set.
So what's the appropriate way would you want?
Yeah.
Anybody else to have them contact the city directly, or?
They can absolutely contact the city. One of the challenges is that the parcels that would likely be suitable for a flight school are all private parcels on the north end of the runway. We've got some opportunities with some of the city parcels, but probably the city parcels aren't going to be of sufficient size, either at the lease areas or the 2 that are on
The west
the
side.
corner, the bend of the airport runway. Likely we would be not quite there for the size from what we've colloquially heard from folks, and if that's consistent with this group. So the challenge is, when it comes to economic development on this one, is where we haven't yet had a lot of the conversations with the private owners all along that strip. When we have an economic development manager here, Don and I have talked about this at length, that we would really like to start knowing the minds of some of these private property owners, so that the ones that are looking to either divest property or are looking to lease property, whatever that is, we feel like we would really benefit from knowing where each of those property owners stands, so that we can be directing people to the right potential opportunities. So that's an area of weakness for us right now, but we identified that as one that we would like to strengthen. So if you guys know some private property owners right now that are interested in moving that direction, I think that it's something city would be supportive of.
And in my conversation with the flight schools, I'm a salesman. I'm sharing the opportunities that we have in Merritt. That brings up one question, Charlie. In the terminal, when you enter the terminal, on the right-hand side, there's 2 or 3 rooms. Are they being used? Would there be an opportunity to rent those from the city on a month-by-month basis?
We utilize the first office there, but when it comes to facilities and rentals, it's not my jam, it's not my department, but it's something I can definitely pass on to that director for sure.
It was just a question, because as a flight school, if they move their temporary base, they need to kind of have a bit of a private office. But they only want it for 3 or 4 months through the summer. And they just have, it's a legal requirement from Transport Canada. And I was thinking, I had offered the terminal to them. I just said, look, there could be an opportunity with a room at the terminal. So if we could look into that as I kind of keep talking to flight schools.
It's good feedback. I can tell you historically it's been storage, but if there's a better purpose than storage, we will make things happen. That's not going to be the block of this. Just to let you guys know, if that's a requirement, whether it's looking at new construction on the parcel or seeing how we can reallocate what we already have at the terminal building, that's absolutely something we can consider.
Because we've had satellite flight schools at the airport in the past, and they have rented space, either one of those 2 offices. Well, there was only actually one, because then they've just since closed that 3rd one. And then the old flying club, the other side of the terminal building, was also leased out. So there's lots of possibilities for that.
So again, city.
Yeah. Question for the committee is, are there any private owners that you've spoken with who own land on that north strip that you're aware of that are looking to utilize land for an airport purpose? Or to sell land to somebody who's looking to do it? Any of those conversations?
I know.
Well, the valley's sitting on their piece of property. That's
Right?
Apparently, that section, when you come to the corner at Airport Road, I think there's 4 acres there that's owned by Otter Co-op, who have never given any indication what they're doing with that property. I know there's another guy that was interested in buying that property for aviation purposes, and it got scooped on him before he was able to move on it. And I know at the time he was looking also at the Sundance property, subdividing off the section next to the runway, because that's a pretty decent piece of property too that could be developed for aviation purposes. But I don't know where that is as far as the property right now goes. So.
Yeah, and we had indicated to the owners that if they were interested in communicating to future purchasers, that the city would be supportive of a subdivision of that parcel to knock that off. So I think that's something that we see would be beneficial. Again, I think that this all becomes quite important right now, because right now there's a mix of zoning up there. Some of it is airport commercial. And is the other stuff M1 or is it service commercial, Don? The other northern parcels?
Yeah, there's a mixture there of some industrial, some service. Service commercial is mostly across, but there is some along the runway there as well. And then of course airport commercial is
Yeah, and so the reason we raised that is because, I mean, as much as can be filled out by airport commercial, I think would be kind of the obvious, natural first choice. But we're seeing quite a bit of light industrial interest in the city right now, and I know that we get inquiries about those parcels, but some of them just don't have as much of a relationship with certain owners as we do with others, and so I think those are relationships that we as the city need to foster.
Good, so you really appreciate being kept in the loop about things like that and having
I think
contact.
This has been helpful, but again, I don't expect the committee to know individuals. I think this is really where we would, if you hear about those opportunities, we would love to have more of these relationships with the owners so that we can pair the right opportunities with the right parcel, and I see that much more as an economic development initiative. And so if you hear about these opportunities, and hopefully as we get more information, we can start making matches.
Good.
Just one question. There is, somebody flattened a parcel and then put a beautiful fence around it. Do you know what's happening there? The fence went up, what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, I mean, they came in and flattened it all, and then they put up this beautiful barbed wire fence just as for that. And it's right to the city's fence.
Yeah, it's right along the airport property line.
It's right to the line. Yeah, so I wonder what they've got in mind for that. Do you know who owns it?
If you're referring to the parcel that is sort of mid runway
Yeah.
on the west side of the airport, that particular parcel is owned by a company that's looking to put a card lock station in there. So, but whether they have all of the permits that are required, et cetera, at this point, I can't say.
Card lock mean fuel sales, correct?
That seems
Really? Isn't the tube pretty narrow?
I would
Turn your trunk around in that
I
spot.
don't see that.
Okay. It's a beautiful fence. It's a narrow circuit.
No other information?
Don doesn't want to share too much.
So it's obviously zoned for that, which may be an error in my opinion.
Well, it's one of the service commercial parcels, and that's the question. Should that be zoned for service commercial?
Oh,
I don't think it's too narrow.
Ooh, okay.
man, that's the danger of that, isn't it?
Yeah, you guys know what we call it. We were saying, okay, we probably need to get the plan down because you've got the split zone right now, and the pressure is a lot more on the industrial type service commercial uses than it is on the airport uses. That being said, I think that there's two ways to do it. One, there's the legislative change approach, which of course you can do, but generally speaking, owners, unless you're having good conversations with them and you say, hey, we want to change your zoning, that's not always an easy conversation. What I would love to see is to start to see more airport uses happening, because airport uses beget airport uses. And so once you see some of these dominoes start to fall, I think we can create more development pressure for those types of uses, and then it more naturally creates that mix. So I'm not ruling out either one. I think it's probably going to be a mixture of both. The challenge is it's really difficult to say in circumstances where looking back in history at how those parcels haven't developed, to say, hey, we don't want any form of development unless it's airport, when there isn't currently a lot of interest in the airport use. So it's a fine line, and it's a tough council challenge, but again, it really comes back to me. I want to know the minds of each one of the owners along that strip and where they are. Can we help them catch a vision for what this could be? I think that's most critically what needs to happen right now, because we're just not all on the same page, and I think we could be.
And I'll just add that as we're developing the official community plan right now, that entire area there would have a development permit area, which would include direction towards airport-related uses along the runway. So that's the first step. Once you have that land use designation and the development permit area aligned for airport uses, then you can look at potentially revising with conversations is the best way with property owners to revise the zoning bylaw accordingly. But the particular property owner of that parcel had the zoning, and they are a business that isn't in the airport related type of business. They operate grocery stores and gas stations, and that's sort of where they wanted to go, is with a card lock gas station. So they had the zoning for it, so there's nothing that we could do unless we wanted to change the zoning on them without their sort of agreement. So it kind of puts us in a bit of a tough spot, but now that we're looking at the OCP, it's a perfect time to have this conversation about exactly what we want on those parcels, and is service commercial appropriate along the western side of the airport. So.
Good, thank you, Don. Is there any information that people need regarding expenditures, income of the airport in 2021? I'm sorry that you didn't get the sheets. I'll send them out as soon as I get home. And then you may have questions on it, but was there anything that you wanted to add to the conversation? Charlie? Okay. So I'll get that out to you right away quick. I put down on the agenda committee duties, and I just thought perhaps we should review whether we want to focus on any particular areas or clarify them, or and then Jeffrey, I didn't put down on here anything about the master plan development, only because I hadn't heard back from you whether you wanted to give a report or not. Okay. So we can leave that for now. But basically, our duties are to inform council on matters concerning the short and long term of the Merritt Community Airport and surrounding areas, and I think we're getting better at that. And to report directly to council as per the council's vision for the airport, and I think that's something that the council also still needs to clarify what the vision of the airport is. But there would be the opportunity for the committee to have input there. To develop opportunities to support the financial self-sufficiency of the airport, and that's pretty much an ongoing thing, and I think we discussed it today that it's getting a little better. To advise council on issues related to the airport as they arise, and most people are pretty good at when there's items that need to be addressed that can be done quickly. Generally inform the committee informs through me through the council. Issues related to the airport as they arise, and I think again people are pretty good at doing that. But one thing we haven't done, I don't think, is to set out clear goals for the committee for the term. And perhaps that's something that would be more appropriate at a work session. And similarly, to liaise with other communities or organizations with overlapping roles and responsibilities. And you had mentioned that perhaps we need to have contact with landowners or other organizations that have interest in the airport, and that's kind of an ongoing process. I don't know how you formalize it. And something that has been put aside, I think, during COVID is to encourage and support events that promotes the community and commercial involvement in the airport. I don't know how we would address that so much right now. The last event, I think, was early COVID with the flying at the airport, and that was pretty much it.
And that was a good event.
Yeah, that was a great event.
And you're all acting as airport ambassadors to advise and work with council to ensure timely maintenance of existing facilities. That's been pretty ongoing. And perhaps the most important one here is to advise council on an annual plan to prioritize capital and maintenance issues at the airport. And I think we're making progress that way. Again, it's a lot of communication. Charlie?
If there's just one thing I can stress is service requests. So if there is an issue with the damaged plane or any kind of maintenance items, please put in a service request. Andrea is our voice of public works, if you will, but it's all about data. It's all about collecting so that we can, at the end of the year, put into our annual report, what are the service requests coming out of the airport. So you can log on to our website, you just hit report a problem, and then fill it in, and it comes down to us as a work order. So for public works, we write what date we responded, who we contacted, we closed the loop on it. So it's a really, really important tracking item for us. and you'll be speaking with Andrea most of the time, so she'll have kind of good inkling on what's going on. But if there is any issues you guys do see up there, you know, if it's maybe dust or, you know, maybe a bit of rocks even on the apron, whatever it may be, please report it, because it's great for us. You guys are...
That's direct reporting, right?
Yeah, it's direct reporting. It comes to us immediately. You can do it on your phone, or you can just simply call City Hall, ask to speak with Andrea, or just report any issues that's there. And then things, you know, if there was an issue with that damaged plane, we can, you know, try to coordinate something immediately.
Could I request the committee that when you do things like that, can you copy all members of the committee so that everybody's kind of kept in the loop, and we know that it's not 9 people you know, reporting the same thing, but that it's been done and so on. And I think it'll help the committee to feel like we're running in the same direction. Andrea.
Sorry. So if you're wanting any customer service request related to the airport emailed out to the committee members? Did I misunderstand?
I don't know if you'd email out the request order or anything like that, but just to kind of to say I did this or I recorded this or something along that line. I don't want to make a lot of work for anybody. What's the best way of doing it?
Any service request that is submitted, I get a copy of. So the easiest is for me just to take that information, how I get it, and send it out. Otherwise, I'm going to be duplicating the process by rewriting what was in there. It's just basic information, who submitted it and what the problem is, in a line that's, you know, 3 or 4 lines.
Okay, that's keep it simple. Yeah. Okay.
That's
it
cool.
Just keeps everybody kind of in the loop that we know what's going on and that the issues aren't being ignored. Anything further?
I have a question. And Charlie, can you update us on what's happening with Trans Mountain? Because I know Andrew phoned me the other day and was asking for some information.
Yeah, so it goes back to the obstacle limitations and them bringing their equipment in, and how they put their proposal forward is to shorten that runway so that they can complete the work, which we are looking to approve, so that they can get in with their side booms, put the pipe in, backfill, and then move forward. So we'll probably see a small shortening of the north end of the runway, northeast. That's where we're basically at right now.
So, by shortening the end of the runway, we have to move the threshold, we have to mark the runway as being closed. That's a huge effort. And what I mentioned...
Runway won't be closed, so they've gone through Transport Canada and supplied their documents. We'll put out the NOTAM of that and then a fence line, so the runway won't be closed.
But they have to displace the threshold.
That's right.
Right, and then you have to white X the end of the runway that's not being used.
That's right.
Is it easier just to say shut the runway down earlier in the afternoon and they can work through the night?
So they're still, that's the other, they're still working through their work program.
Yeah, please don't shut down the runway. I use it 5-6 times a day, all hours of the day, and so does a whole bunch of other people. Displace the threshold is by far the easiest. Even the DC3 that came in only did 3,000 feet, and we have 4, so
yeah.
Displace the threshold, don't close it.
Yeah, so we're working with them right now. We have recommended nighttime work as well.
Yeah.
Their full work program hasn't been totally submitted or completed yet, so we're still working with them. But I'm sure you've noticed they're getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
Good. Any other questions or comments before? I think that's all the business that we have, right?
I don't believe we've actually had a working meeting since we had our last official meeting. And with the COVID thing, I get that. But I do think there's value in having those working meetings so that we're kind of on the same page. And people have been working. Doug and Ian and Jeff have all been working but we're not doing it together. And so I would like to see us having regular working meetings, so that we can encourage one another and all be moving in the same direction. When we come to these meetings, we're informed on where everybody's at and what's happening, and we all have a chance to give input into what people are doing. So I think the way to continue to have an active committee is we need to be getting together. And so I don't know how we do that.
I think there's two kinds of work meetings, and one is where Ian is working on a project and maybe needs to contact a few members that are on the same webpage. But I think probably the best way is to again use email, saying I'm having a work session on this. You're welcome to attend. And I know what you're saying. It's just I'm still uncomfortable with COVID to be in large groups all the time. But I think if people are given the opportunity, if there's a work session, to say, yeah, I'll be there. And I would appreciate being invited, even if I'm considered useless at it. It's still nice to be on the know. Any other comments before we close the meeting? All right, this meeting is terminated. And thank you for coming out, and thank you for being honest. And I will send out those sheets to you because they're quite interesting about the fuel sales and reporting on the income.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Charlie, and thanks, Don.
Take care.